Speaker.
Jan Logie.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker.
Tēnā koe.
It's a pleasure to rise and offer the Green Party support as well to the Civil Defence Emergency Management Amendment Bill. And I would like to join the previous speakers by acknowledging the Minister Nikki Kaye for her work and hope that the way the discussions progress, that she can take some sense of satisfaction in that and her role in achieving what has become is an important piece of legislation to start with, and as has been mentioned by Ruth Dyson, who chaired the committee, has been improved through the select committee process in partnership and discussion with the Minister. And I would like to acknowledge Ruth Dyson for her role on the chairing the committee in that process, as well as the officials and all of the submitters. It's been mentioned that it was a small group of submitters, but they were, the submissions were of a very high quality, and I particularly want to acknowledge Christchurch City Council for their contribution, which really helped inform our understanding, and they pointed us in directions of areas that we needed to be wary of and take cognizance of, and the bill is much improved from their input. So this is about dealing with small and medium-sized disasters and civil defence emergencies. And so it's not dealing with the large-scale events as we saw in Christchurch. And it has been raised earlier that we've been promised initially when this first came to the House that we would have legislation to deal with those large emergencies this year. It does not look to me, I've heard no rumours of that coming to us this year. And I do think the point bears repeating and is an important one, that we really should be looking at the interconnection between the plans and the legislation at all levels to make sure that everything fits and makes sense. And it is quite difficult to do that when you're only looking at one part of the puzzle. So I would encourage the government to speed up whatever process they are going through for us to be able to consider that next wave of legislation for large emergencies not long after this, so that this is still fresh in our minds so we can make those connections easily. I do just want to point particularly, I would be a bad Green Party MP if I didn't draw the House's attention again to the importance of this legislation in light of climate change and the increased severe natural events that we're seeing all over the world, and pointing out that there was an average of 78 recorded national disasters every year through the 1970s. Now there are over 350 recorded natural disasters every year. And some of the figures I read showed that 217 million people have been impacted by natural disasters every single year since the 1980s. And New Zealand, we've been spending between $1.2 and $2 billion a year cleaning up natural disasters in this country. And this is going to become increasingly true as we deal with the level of climate change that has already been locked in. So for us, while we absolutely recognise the increasing importance of this kind of legislation and getting our response right, it's also a call to action for us all to be able to reduce our emissions to actually save us from worse disasters in the future. And it is not right for us to be having this conversation without having that awareness and that compulsion to act, because it is about property, it is about communities, it is about people's lives and the future of this country. So some of the specifics around this bill, just that it is provided greater role definition for people taking roles in this recovery stage. It is about moving from response in the immediate aftermath of an event, moving into the recovery, which is a longer term transition back to a new reality. And so we heard it through the committee from some of the submissions, past experience where people's roles weren't locked into legislation, and there was some people felt that they weren't able to do the roles that needed, the jobs that needed to be done. So this legislation gives them that security to know that they can go and do those tasks, and they have legislative backing to do it. We know that some of the people have been doing those roles anyway, even because they needed to be done, but they didn't have the backing of any legislation. So it's really great that the House is now providing them with that. And because it is absolutely essential work. It also will improve coordination between the different leaders in that recovery process. And also we heard submissions telling us about how some people were worried about that maybe it was somebody else's role to do something so that they wouldn't do it and they couldn't ask them for it, and that there was so much uncertainty and it caused time delays and uncertainty in the process, and that, you know, has a flow-on effect for people's ability to recover, and it has a real impact on the ground. This sorts out, we hope, those coordination issues and clarifies people's roles and responsibilities. I would also just like to reiterate the point about how we were initially uneasy, would be, about the increased ministerial roles or powers, and are very pleased to have seen significant amendments through the committee process on that. And Honourable Ruth Dyson has talked about some of the misuse of those ministerial powers in Christchurch. And I also think that the point needs to be made is that this isn't just about preventing a big bad central government from doing terrible things to a local community. Getting this balance right between local and central government is just also in large part about getting good decisions and good results in the long term, because the knowledge is held at a local level. Resilience is enabled through relationships at a local level. And we saw that so clearly in Christchurch as we have in other places. And we do know that there were some things that went wrong. And talking to people in Littleton and their experience of where they'd had a time bank that had been operating, that had enabled that in community to know what skills everyone had. And so after the earthquake, they knew they could call everyone together and they could send people out to do the jobs that needed to be done, because they knew who had what skills and what needed to be done, and the network was there. And that was working well, and people felt that they actually were doing something, and it was helping them deal with the quake, the aftermath of their quake, as well as respond. And then central government came in and locked them out of the process. And it slowed down the recovery, and it meant all of those people felt like the role and the value they were adding, that they no longer had a value. And it really displaced people, and it was unnecessary and counterproductive. So I absolutely hope that this piece of legislation gets that balance right. But I do think there needs to be constant evaluation and learning from each event to make sure that what we hope is going to be delivered from this legislation is actually realised in practice. And just finally on the point about the PLRs, and which also looked a little bit dodgy when we first got it, I was totally reassured by the advice that we had from Treasury and the officials that this is actually just gives the local authorities the certainty that the money will come and that there is that degree of trust. And I think that is the appropriate mechanism. So it's nice to stand up in the House and say good things about a piece of legislation. It's an uncommon experience for me. So thank you for that, Minister Kay.
Ooh.
Mr. Speaker.
Clayton